Okay, so once again, today is our third of our spring webinar series. We're going to talk a bit about taking your Talking Points account to the next level. Our first webinar kind of gave an introductory level overview to Talking Points and some of the different features. Our second webinar talked a bit about how families are interacting with Talking Points, and we actually gave participants the chance to put on their family hats. And then today is really going to be how to maximize your accounts and really take them to the next level to deepen family engagement. Throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat box. My colleague Emma will be helping me out in the chat during the presentation. I'll also try and take some breaks in between to answer any out loud. And then we'll also save some time at the end for a question and answer session. Okay, so once again, any questions, send them through the chat. Okay, so for today, a quick overview, a kind of mini agenda is first, I want to start just by overviewing some of our new features that have come out. Next, I want to talk about a few tips and tricks that we've kind of compiled to help make your communication with families that much more efficient. And then lastly, one of the big things is really how to make talking points part of your routine. We know there are 1,000,001 things going on, and the hard part is finding time for all of this. So how can you add it to your routine and make it something that you don't spend a lot of time on? It's something that kind of just gets built in automatically. Okay. So our new feature that I'm going to overview today is our video captioning. This was released about 2 weeks ago. I'm going to start by just showing you a quick video, and then we'll talk a bit about it. Hopefully the sound works. This is on the family's end.
Hi everybody, it's Miss D here. I wanted to say Happy New Year to everybody, and I'll see you on Monday, ready to go.
Okay, so the video captioning, once again, is something that is we were really excited to release, and it came from feedback from our partners. The way that it works is to send videos with the captioning. Staff will have to go through the app. We're currently not we're unable to do it on the desktop browser version of Talking Points. So you have to pull up your mobile device and go to the Talking Points for Teachers app. And then what happens is once you get it, you can record a video. You'll see the option that you can kind of check it off. And then the captions will be automatically added based on the home language of your recipients. So imagine you have a class of 10 students, and just think of they each have one contact. So you have someone that speaks Urdu, someone that speaks Tagalog, someone that speaks Spanish, and someone that speaks French. When you hit send, it'll automatically get translated for you. There's nothing you have to do on your end to designate it. And then something that we found some of our teachers doing is they're like, listen, we love this feature. It's so awesome to be able for, certain language groups to have this video with the captions. They're like, what else can we do with these videos? So we actually had one partner that shared this with us. They were like, what we did was we want to use these in more meetings with our Spanish speaking families. So to kind of capture this, they added themselves as a student to their class. The next thing they did was they updated their home language, and then they were able to save the video to the phone. So as a teacher, you can kind of put yourself as a student in your class if you want to be able to save the videos and use them in other things. It's super simple, and it definitely helped a lot. This is actually one quote that we got from a teacher that found out about the video captioning. When I found out about this feature, I was through the roof. Since we're still remote, I'll be able to send weekly videos to my families and say hello. With so much isolation, I want them to see my face. And this is a really, when I saw this, it put a big smile on my face as a former teacher, to really establish those connections with families and not simply just send messages, but showing my face and saying, hello, this is my, our weekly message. I hope you all are doing well. And that's something that families can then share with their students, especially at their, elementary level. This helps to build that interaction and build that community. Another really helpful feature for families is our text-to-speech function. Okay, basically, what this looks like is for messages coming from the schools, any families that have the Talking Points for Parents app, they're able to have the message or announcement read aloud to them. Once again, this isn't applicable for the families that have SMS, but for those that have the app, when they get the message, if they go to the bottom right and click on the little audio button, the message will be read aloud to them. Now, I tried this. It's ideal when families on their phone have their phone language set. So for example, I speak Portuguese. So for this message, to ensure that I have a Portuguese speaker, I set my phone to the language be Portuguese, and that matches the home language and Talking Points. That way it's not an English speaker speaking the language, it's the correct accent. And this was really helpful for families that aren't literate in their home language. We know that some families can't read in Spanish or read in Haitian Creole or read in French. So what they can do is actually listen to it, and that makes it so much easier for them to communicate. Okay, now a few tips for translation. As we're messaging, I think as native English speakers, we kind of want to get down everything we're thinking in the message. But obviously the people that we're sending messages to may not be native speakers of English. And that's something that's really important to keep in mind to make sure that all of our messages are very clear when they're going through. The first tip is be concise and use simple sentences. Sometimes English will translate into longer text. So I'm someone who's always like, hello, good morning, how are you? But sometimes that can make the translation a bit more difficult. So for example, you might say something like, in English, I wanted to let you know that tomorrow's quiz has been rescheduled to Friday. Okay, but thinking through in that sentence, I may want to just leave out, I wanted to let you know. And instead the message will say tomorrow's quiz has been rescheduled to Friday. That way it's just brief and the families know exactly what the information is that they need to obtain. And that kind of goes to the economy of language, not only to help them understand the message, but because even for families that are getting SMS messages, there is a 320 character limit, meaning that longer messages would have to be divided into multiple. So finding, a good place at the end of a sentence to kind of end that first message and send your second one. The second tip is using the active voice as opposed to passive voice. Now, I'm sure some of you are like, active voice, passive voice, oh my goodness. You're taking me back to either a language class or ELA. Basically, what that means is just simplifying your sentence. So for example, instead of saying the house was painted by 3 men, that's an example of passive voice. You may just want to flip it and say 3 men painted the house. Sometimes with translations, and depending on the language, it may impact how it's understood. So when possible, try and use the active voice. The next piece is think about how to most effectively use humor. What we're saying is we're not saying be super serious in every message and never, make them laugh, but just think, because sometimes not everything translates the way that you want it to. So I had to learn this the hard way, even like haha, every language, says a little bit differently. So in Spanish, it's haha, but it's J-A. In Portuguese, it's actually like hiso, so RS, RS. So it kind of varies on the language, or different things like LOL. It won't translate into other languages. Another piece of the humor is kind of that added piece like nuances. So sometimes when using humor, we may kind of use some different slang or idioms. So that's one thing we want to kind of avoid. So for example, instead of saying, we want to use the word met instead of ran into, because they may say, okay, I ran into somebody, what? Or, in a previous example for the video captioning, the teacher said, oh, I was through the roof when I found out about this. For people who are learning English, they'll think of it literally like I went through the roof. What? I don't get it. So maybe instead using excited or ecstatic. And also, once again, another one to add is abbreviations to this list. Trying to avoid those, or if you can, spell them out when you can. Another important one, avoid words that may have multiple meanings. So for example, the word mad, okay, it could be mad like emotional, or, for slang, like mad as in very like, this hat is mad expensive. Okay, trying to avoid things like that and just say, you know what, he was angry. And that way there's less room for interpretation or misunderstandings. Another one that I think I often forget as well is using relative pronouns such as that and which. I think when we're speaking, we tend to leave them out, but in sending messages, trying including, oh, that doesn't use a that. So for example, I think that he is right. Okay, in English, we could say, I think that he is right, or I think he is right. And then the last thing is just remembering when using talking points, we will translate the message, okay? But anything that you attach to the message, so whether it could be a document, it could be, different things like that, those won't get translated. So if you do have a larger letter that you want to go out to families, either working with your school or district to, get a translated version, or a version that's as concise as possible using keywords that won't be too much of a trouble for families to read through. Some schools will kind of send those letters to the translation office to help with that. One thing that I wanted to show you all is when messaging, we do have some customizable fields that can make the messages a bit more personalized. So for example, I'm going to pull up the list right here. Okay. In your message, if you write and include these fields in, it'll automatically populate. So for the example, we see good morning. This is, and then we put in brackets student's first name. Okay. So that way it'll say, good morning. This is Joseph, Spanish teacher, or good morning. This is Maria, Spanish teacher. We can also update it for the school. So you don't have to type in the name of your school all the time. Or if, you're between schools, you can use this template. Okay. And it'll automatically update whether you're at Jones Creek Elementary or if you're at Willowbrook Elementary. You can also fill in the parent language. So for example, the second sentence, let me know if you prefer receiving messages in parent language, or if you prefer messages in English. This would be a kind of a great introductory message. And that way parents can indicate, you know what, I feel more comfortable speaking in Arabic, or you know what, I feel confident that I can speak in English. So I'm going to take a quick break right here. Emma, any questions coming through in the chat? Anything I can explain or clarify?
No questions in the chat. Thanks, Dimitri.
Of course. Thanks, Emma. Okay. One of the big things as a former teacher, I know that time was of the essence. I know oftentimes Sunday evenings was my day to kind of get my life together and really start planning for the week. Getting my lesson plans together, and even, going on talking points, getting messages together that I want to send later in the week or the following week. But the biggest thing that we see is really making talking points part of your routine isn't difficult. So we have 3 teachers here that kind of shared a bit about what they do. So for example, Mr. Brinson, in the morning, I go to my computer and write a message to parents about that day's homework assignment or reminders. This takes only 5 minutes. This is something that after a while is just automatic, but it also helps parents, like every day I'm going to get a message from Mr. Brinson about what my child has to do today. Then we have Ms. Cardenas in Tennessee, early on in the pandemic, so this time last year, sending out polls to her students to kind of get an idea of, what kind of technology do you have at home? But then also, sharing really important information about meal pickups, picking up packets of work, or even schools opening and closing and mask wearing rules and things like that. So it's been a really useful tool to communicate just basic policies and important information. And then lastly, I have Miss Berger in Tennessee. This one makes me smile as well. Every week, I send positive messages to the parents of my ESOL students. This app is amazing to help me connect with my families. I think sometimes, with teachers, once again, time is of the essence. And, I think we may prioritize like, what, this student wasn't in class today, or, he got a really bad grade on this assignment, or maybe his behavior wasn't up to par. Let me reach out. But don't remember, also celebrate achievements. Use this as a tool just to have great conversations with families, and not just ones that require, that deal with like a negative issue. I have a few more examples of things that we've heard from teachers, how they've been using Talking Points this school year. Talking Points is yet another tool I can use to make sure I can assess student learning. For families struggling with tech access, students submit their work by sending a picture via Talking Points. So basically this teacher, we were talking about how for some of her younger scholars, they may have trouble logging on to Google Classroom and submitting work and putting it in Dropbox or things like that. So something that she gave them was the option of having their parents take a picture and then sending that through via Talking Points. It may not come through the direct channel into Google Classroom, but at least this student can credit for their work. They can do a picture, or, sometimes if there's like an extra credit activity where maybe they have to act out or do like a 1 or 2 minute skit of somebody, their family member can take a video and submit that. So it's, you can get really creative with how you collect work from your scholars. Another quote we have is, "It's such a game changer. It makes it so much easier to get families involved to support their child. This is so important to make sure that we aren't letting any kids fall through the cracks." This is something that I hear. I think, some students are thriving during remote learning when others are really struggling. So really using Talking Points as a mean to communicate with families and, allowing them to advocate for what their students need and support them throughout this, remote or hybrid instruction. So for example, this teacher actually sent a message to all of her classes, with the end of the marking period coming up, just letting them know, first, when is the last day to hand in any missing work? But also, they even said, here, I have included an assignment list, so it includes like the title, the amount of points that it's worth, when it was due. And this way they can use that to reference their grades in Power School. So they do see any zeros or any missing work, they know exactly what to do and can get it submitted by the end of the quarter to get those grades in. Another teacher actually used it to help schedule in parent-teacher conferences. Sometimes, some families can get overlooked just because of working and the language barrier, but it's so important to establish contact and have conversations. So this is useful, for having lengthier conversations or more confidential conversations that can't be had over Talking Points. They were actually able to put a link into the message where they could schedule the meetings from their phone. A really cool thing that I liked is not only are they sending the message in the link, but they even included a poll question for those families, just asking, for these meetings, do you need a translator to be present? And that way, for those that marked yes, the teacher's able to follow up with their school administration or their leadership team to say, hey, we're going to have a meeting next Thursday at 5. Can you help us by providing some kind of translation service or a translator on the call as well? So really helpful. And once again, really supporting families where they're at. The last quote that came through, Talking Points has been such a great tool that I use to keep my parents updated with everything happening in my class, at the school, and even in our community. So this teacher, they said, you know what, it's a new month. Something that they do is at the beginning of every month, they send a calendar to their families, just giving them kind of an overview of any upcoming assignments and projects, but also important school events. So here we have a copy of, I just made one for myself. I used to be a high school Spanish teacher, if you couldn't tell, but just thinking like, you know what, for the month of April, here are some important assignments or some important assessments like quizzes and unit exams. Particular teachers have even made it able for them to open the document as a PDF. They can click on the day. So for example, if they click on the extra credit, it'll bring them to a hyperlink that'll bring them to a page that has more information. So this way, not only are they, know when things are due, but they can click it and help support their scholars in reaching those deadlines. And once again, it has information, not only just what's happening in the class, but just letting them know, hey, spring break is this week. There's not going to be any school. And then lastly, I think, once again, we really are a family engagement platform. And we really want to get families engaged in their children's learning. So some ways on how you can continue to deepen that relationship. I think using polls check-in regularly with families. So not just on things like, do you need a translator? But for example, how comfortable are you sending your child back to school? So, depending on where you're at, schools may be considering opening either fully or on a hybrid schedule, but really being able to engage with their families. Do you feel comfortable? And if not, what's getting in the way? Also, do you feel up to date with everything happening at the school? Sometimes there's, especially with the language barrier, they may not be getting all the information that they need. So with those families that, respond no, the teacher can follow up and say, hey, is there anything that I can do to support? They can get their school leadership team or their family engagement coordinator on that as well. This way they feel like they have all the information they need to set their child up for success. And then a bit more fun is, with spring break coming up, what do you have planned for your child during spring break? And this, they can, give them options, but they can also leave it open-ended to see, is anybody going to, Pam's going to be working, or is anything we can support with? Something else is, we kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but don't focus just on grades or negative behaviors. Sharing praise for things that happen class-wide or for individual students. So for example, sometimes classes may have like a class goal, like, our goal is the whole class will get an 80% or above, demonstrate 80% mastery on a certain exam. If that happens, let families know. Or maybe it's an individual student who wasn't doing as good the week leading up to it. But the following week, their behavior really turned around. They're doing a lot better in the classroom. Share that with families. They want to know about that. Also, sending resources that would benefit students, family, and the greater community. So it may be about things happening in the classroom, but it could even be information about, COVID vaccines, or it could be information about, how to pick up meals, or, if it's for high school students, different scholarships, things like that. So don't feel restricted to just focus on things happening within your classroom, but open it up and really get them involved in the conversation. And then the last thing is, once again, remember, you're engaging families, but it's two ways. So you're learning about them and they're learning about you. So what we saw earlier with the video captioning, where the teacher is using it as a weekly kind of, instead of a newsletter, like a little weekly video for families, think about different things that you can do to kind of build those connections, especially if you're still remote and you haven't had the chance to meet your families face to face. This is a great way to kind of break the ice and, remember that we're all human. We're all going through our current reality and kind of trying to manage in different ways. Okay, so I'm gonna break. Emma, any questions in the chat?
No questions. Thanks, Dimitri.
Of course, of course. So we do have a few minutes left, but something I do want to remind you of is this: we do have one more webinar next week on Tuesday, March 23rd at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 Pacific. Something to just remember is this is going to be for your admin. So if you're watching this and you're like, you know what, either my admin loves Talking Points, or maybe my admin doesn't really know much about Talking Points, definitely invite them to this session. We're going to be talking about, how to increase family engagement from a school leader perspective with their analytics dashboard, which is a feature of the school admin platform on Talking Points. Once again, thank you all for joining us today. We will be having more webinars, maybe not this school year, but stay tuned for some more in the future. Thanks again for joining, and we wish you all a great day and have a good week. Take care.